Well, welcome everybody. I'd like to say hello to everybody joining us to the Government of Canada M365 Council. I do hope that you've noticed the rebranding from O365 to M365. I'm Barry Doucette. I'm the CEO of Orangutech. I'm almost certain that everybody here knows me and has seen me over the years. Really appreciate everyone dialing in and being a part of the council. And we've got a wonderful presentation. We had a great January and February presentations. In January, we had the Global Affairs presentation on their journey to M365, particularly over the last year. In February, we had a case study from IRB. Orangutech's Chief Technology Officer, Daniel Sincarche, presented EDRMS in M365 and IRB case study. Been a lot of interested people. We think we'll do that again in September. We'll have an update in September on that one. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to me to barry.doucette@orangutech.com. We have Sylvana Gatto presenting. I'll do that introduction in a moment. We're looking for May that we will have most likely Department of Justice, DOJ presenting their journey. And in June, looks like we're going to have Treasury Board and an update on GC Exchange from Treasury Board. They presented last July, middle of summer. So we're looking forward to an update just before this summer. It's almost a full year later and have the opportunity to present. That would be great. That would be a really solid ending of our year, and we'd then take July and August off and kick off in September. As you all know, we're on Teams Live. If you have questions, please type them out. We'll publish them. You know, questions with the most votes definitely would be the ones that we'll ask Sylvana at the end of this. So really looking forward to this. I'm going to introduce Sylvana Gatto. You all know Sylvana as well. Sylvana's been our MC since at least January on all these, and she'll continue to be our MC. Sylvana did a presentation last week. Sylvana is the Director of Sales for Orangutech. She did a presentation at a conference last week called ShiftHappens, the federal government's accelerated cloud journey. And of course, we thought it was valuable to present it to, hey, the best people in the best organization we know, GoC M365 Council. So please welcome Sylvana Gatto as she presents ShiftHappens, the federal government's accelerated cloud journey. Over to you, Sylvana. You might be on mute, Sylvana.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. And let me just reshare this and you can see the slides. Perfect.
Yes, we can.
All right. Thanks so much, Barry. So happy to be here. Like Barry said, I presented this same presentation last week at an AvePoint conference. And one of the biggest differences was the audience was international, mostly American, private sector. So it's going to be fun to present this to you guys, to everyone that has been showing up to our M365 councils for so many months now, maybe even some of you a couple of years. So it's going to be interesting to tell your story from our perspective, from Orangutech's perspective. And at the end of this, we'll open it up, as Barry said, to conversation and questions. So the great shift, how the Government of Canada accelerated their journey to M365. As Barry said, I'm Sylvana Gatto. I'm the sales director here at Orangutech. So before I started at Orangutech, I actually worked for a cybersecurity company, and we were selling solutions to hedge funds and private equity firms on Wall Street. So I was used to quick wins, wining and dining, and basically an unlimited access to funds. So when I was ready to take the next jump in my career, one of my only requirements was I didn't want to sell to the Canadian federal government. Sorry. I'd been programmed for so long to associate the federal government with red tape, with structured budget cycles, and laggards when it came to adopting new technology. And as we all know, I live in Ottawa, Canada. It was pretty much inevitable that I was going to be serving the GoC at some point, with Ottawa being the capital and the center of government. So it wasn't long before I was calling on some of the top CIOs and senior directors at some of the most important government departments and agencies. And did I experience red tape, structured budget cycles, and archaic technology? Yeah, sure I did. But I also experienced a group of IT professionals and executives that were really determined and driven to break down these barriers, to move their departments forward into a new age, a new era of technology, and really advance this digital workplace. And this is what excited me. This drive, this determination to move towards a more modern way of working is what allowed me to put aside my stereotypical judgments of what it meant to work alongside the GoC and instead join forces to do what I could to help these departments along on their journey. As many of you know, Orangutech is a solutions-based company. We're headquartered here in Ottawa. We've been a Microsoft partner for over 15 years, ever since we started. We really began as a SharePoint consultancy. That's what a lot of people knew us as, and we've evolved with our clients over the years. So now we are focused on helping the government of Canada on their journey to the cloud, more specifically M365. So we provide software and service-based solutions focused on digital workplace, user adoption, and information management. And it's so much fun, as all of you know. All of our clients are on the same journey to the cloud. They're just at different stages. So we're really able to leverage our experience and our expertise to share with departments what their peers are doing and really share those lessons learned so that we don't have to go back to recreating the wheel every single time. And that's what the value of this M365 Council has really been and proven to be over the years. So I remember back in September 2017, right when I was starting with Orangutech, I attended a Microsoft conference. And the main topic being discussed at the conference was Office 365, Microsoft 365. And I'll never forget the conversations around the attendee tables were rooted in skepticism. The overall sentiment was departments didn't want to go to the cloud. They were happy with the status quo, staying on-prem. There was fear and hesitancy around security, obviously data residency. And yeah, it was just, there was skepticism across the board. That was September. Fast forward 6 months, and I remember Barry and I had 3 separate meetings with 3 influential departments. And the key people at each of those meetings made it very clear, only 6 months later, that M365 was now on the horizon. And I'll never forget going back to the office that at the end of the week, and it was very clear that the conversation was no longer if the government is going to the cloud, it's when and how are they going to get there. Barry announced to our company, M365 is coming and it's going to be a tsunami. So from that point forward, M365 was at the forefront of our organization. We needed to do everything that we could to ensure that we were ready to help you and help our clients on this journey. So here was our idea. We were already working with 80% of the core GoC departments. So our plan was to create a monthly M365 Council meeting. And each month we would invite a different department to come and present their story, their department's journey to the cloud. And we knew they were going to start with roadmaps, then talk about implementations, and eventually start talking about lessons learned. And here we are. The first M365 Council meeting took place in June 2018. And at that point, everyone knew change was coming. That's why so many people were listening in to what their peers had to say on this topic. And departments at that time were determining where Office 365 was on their department's list of priorities and where ultimately the funding was going to come from. And some of those original roadmaps showed that the move to the cloud was going to take 3 to 4 years. So let me paint the picture. So it's April 1st, 2019. There's 400,000 federal employees, making up 208 government departments and agencies. The government just invested a significant amount of money and purchased M365 licenses for every single employee. So if it wasn't clear yet, M365 was coming and departments really had no choice. And there was going to be early adopters, as we know. There was 6 at the very beginning, and there was also going to be departments that were kind of slow to adopt, which is always the case. But the general plan was that the Government of Canada would be in the cloud by 2022. Fast forward almost a full year this time. It's March 2020, a month that we're all too familiar with. The world is turned upside down, and almost overnight, the entire workforce is sent to work from home. So those 3 to 4 year roadmaps that we were just talking about were tossed out the window, and departments were forced to shift quickly. Shift happens, right? So as I prepared for this presentation, I interviewed a lot of our clients, maybe some of you that are on the call today, just to prepare for the presentation and really get an understanding of what this pivot meant for departments, what they were forced to do right at the beginning, right as March 2020, I think it was March 16th, hit. And there was 3 themes that continued to come up. Cultural shift, operational shift, and developmental shift. And we're going to dive into each of these quickly. So we'll start with cultural shift. So federal executives and decision makers were forced to reassess their risk tolerance. Remember a few minutes ago when we were talking about those initial roadmaps? Well, sometimes those roadmaps took 12 to 24 months to develop before that 3 to 4 year clock even started ticking. And as we know, the government has never been known to have a high risk tolerance. And they think through all obstacles, all outcomes, all circumstances before moving forward with any big decision, big change, big plan. So last March, when they were forced to throw these roadmaps out the window and make quick decisions, there was also no choice but to take risks that would have been unthinkable in the past. There were hundreds of thousands of employees that needed to get up and going in a work from home environment. The way people viewed cloud technology and software was also different. Departments began to focus on the positives and all the opportunities that came with moving to the cloud, and recognized that remaining status quo, remaining on-prem was no longer an option. And this was a very different mentality than that first conference that I went to back in September 2017. And finally, rethinking the traditional workplace was also necessary. In an industry that was typically conducting work during 9 to 5 in physical buildings, where meetings were happening in person around boardroom tables, and briefing notes were printed on paper, and any communication was done through physical teleconference systems. The work from home situation really forced everyone to rethink how they worked. And MS Teams was introduced in a matter of weeks, and it was a game changer in terms of collaboration. Shift number 2, operational. So we've talked about the need of how work got done, like needed to change, but what people used to do their work also needed to change last March. I talked to a senior director that told me a lot of their employees didn't even have laptops to take home. So they were forced to take home their desktops until an appropriate number of laptops were procured. And then let's talk security. So security was obviously one of the main deterrents at the beginning, the main conversation topics that came up when we discussed moving to M365. And last March, security could no longer be the #1 obstacle. Rolling out technology and licenses was the most important objective at the beginning. So IT teams had to expedite those security policy and procedure plans in order for them to be able to roll out those initial M365 environments. And then finally, user adoption. User adoption rates were at an all-time high because employees didn't see this as more technology that was being pushed on them by IT. Instead, they saw it, they were desperate. They needed technology in order to do their work, in order to collaborate with their employees and their colleagues, and just to conduct meetings either internally or externally. And the final shift is developmental. So there was no time at the beginning to map everything out in advance before deploying. Detailed roadmaps were no longer an option, and departments were forced to release technology as it was ready, sometimes prematurely, in an iterative manner. As we all know, there was a centralized M365 environment that was spun up in order to allow users to access the federal government, to communicate with colleagues, and to stay up to date on the ever-changing situation that we were going through last spring and really over the past year. And these environments were designed to be decommissioned once the final M365 production environments were deployed at the individual department level. And at its peak, 5,000 new users were being onboarded to this ad hoc M365 tenant per week to ensure that departments could get back up and fully operational as soon as possible. And finally, let's talk governance. So since departments were forced to rush the rollout of teams, team sprawl spiraled out of control very quickly. So along with all the benefits that came with this new way of working and this new way of collaborating, departments really needed to focus on developing a new governance plan and models to adapt to this new way of working. So the implications of all three of these shifts and what they entailed were very real. And for a while, we thought they were temporary. We thought that the story of the government's move to M365 would be told in 3 pieces: pre-COVID, COVID, and post-COVID. But the reality is that we've shifted into a new way of working, and we're not going back. Sure, things are going to change as they always do, but there's not going to be that post-COVID rollback of technology like we might have thought a year ago. The advancements in M365 are here to stay. So as you can imagine, there have been a lot of lessons learned throughout this accelerated journey to the cloud, and you've all experienced so many of them. And a lot of those lessons learned have been shared at these M365 Council meetings by fellow departments that have come and shared their experiences with you. And 3 of them really stood out to us. One was using the crisis as a catalyst for change, addressing risk tolerance, and reassessing policies and procedures. So I'm going to wrap up with a story about one of our clients, one of your peers, that touches on each of these 3 lessons learned. So I was speaking with a director of a 5,000 person department, and just like so many other departments, he told me that they had been planning to start the move to M365 in 2020. but they had not received any funding for it. So as of January 2020, there was very little progress being made on this project because it was still not on the department's priority list. Lesson number 1, using a crisis as a catalyst for change. When the crisis hit, they had no choice but to adjust this list of priorities. The implementation of M365 was now at the forefront, like all other departments. First, they moved to the temporary SSC M365 environment, and then they launched their own M365 tenant last September. And now they have Teams, they have OneDrive, and they're about to deploy Exchange Online and SharePoint Online this coming June. Lesson number 2, address risk tolerance. Instead of following their structured roadmaps in a systematic and controlled way, this department was forced and had no choice but to execute a lot of these steps in parallel to one another. And this had to happen just to be able to accelerate and to push out those initial M365 implementation plans. And taking these risks meant that they had better collaboration tools now than they did in the past, because certain barriers were taken down and executives and the IT teams were really able to think outside of the box and be innovative for maybe the first time they felt comfortable to in a long time. And they were able to enable their end users with the tools that they needed to work efficiently from home or from wherever they were working. And lesson 3, reassessing policies and procedures. So the senior director let me know there is a new future of work initiative that's being launched that will determine what the future of work will look like. He knows that we'll not be going back to the way we were working back in March 2020 before we left the office. And it's going to take a while to determine what that next step looks like. But the reality is that majority of federal employees are going to be working in this hybrid work from home, work from the office situation for the foreseeable future, and maybe even for years to come. So I'm going to wrap up with a quote that this director shared with me that I think sums things up nicely and might resonate with a lot of you. He told me, "This journey has been like we're building an airplane in mid-flight on the way to a destination that keeps on changing." It's been a wild ride, and Orangutech team has been so happy to be on this ride with you, helping you out in any way that we can along the way. And it's funny, and I know Barry, this is a big story for Barry. Before the pandemic, before we even heard of this ShiftHappens conference, the Orangutech team would joke internally about this list that we had created. It wasn't necessarily actually written down, but we would talk about it in our meetings, and it was called the Barry, can I say it? The Get Shit Done list, or our clients that made shift happen. And it's so funny that it kind of aligned with this, and our plan was just to continue adding people like you, people that are here to advance the Canadian federal government, to advance your departments that are working so hard to really break down that status quo, break down those barriers, and make a difference. And we're recognizing you, and we thank you for everything that you're doing in this space. And thank you for continuing to show up to these M365 meetings every month. It makes a big difference to your peers. It's great to hear your stories. And if we didn't have you telling your stories, we wouldn't have this platform. So really appreciate it. I know Barry's back on. I think we're going to open things up for questions. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, everyone, thank you, Sylvana. Great job. I just want to repeat what Sylvana said here. Literally, we talked about having what we're going to call it a makeshift happen. Take the F out if you'd like. Party someday, and when we do that, when we're all back, we want to invite everybody here to join us. And you guys have been incredible. I've said that, as everyone knows, since probably last April, May. Just congratulating everybody on the video here and everyone attending. And Sylvana, thank you so much for that presentation. It was really interesting for Sylvana and the team to really dial in and speak to a lot of the senior directors and managers and understand what they've done and the challenges they faced. And, you know, when you hear, you know, the amazing work they've done, you know, the cultural shift, the operational shift, developmental shift, and all the pieces they've learned as they went forward from there. And then the clear lessons of using a crisis for catalyst. I hear that all the time for change, addressing risk tolerance, and reassessing policy and procedure. I've got to definitely be very proud of everybody on the phone here. I don't see any questions. I'm not surprised by that. You know, if you have a question, please ask. Otherwise, if you're interested in presenting at oh, we got a good one. Did you? We do have a pretty good one. So let me publish this and I'll even ask it of you. It's anonymous, so I didn't get to read it all, but did you find certain discussions were repeated on a regular basis with control groups such as InfoSec or ITSec? We have been trying to get several of our packages through, but despite being in the same family, it seems that the original sign-offs are not being welcomed by these groups. It would be interesting to hear if other departments are having these same struggles and how we would be successful in enabling these ventures. That's a great question, and thank you, Anonymous. I think the way that's a really good question. Don't know that I have a answer here. Sylvana, did you find that people were talking around InfoSec or ITSec and about being challenged to get the approvals for them to go online with M365?
I don't think I heard that specific topic come up, but I know that a lot of the topics that we did discuss with different departments, like the same topics were coming up over and over. So, which is why we were able to put together a presentation like this with 3 shifts and 3 lessons learned, because we did continue to hear things over and over. So I would not be surprised that if one department is experiencing difficulties with those approvals, that other departments are probably experiencing the same. I don't know if there's anyone that's listening that wants to just shoot us a quick email after and we can make that connection. We'd be happy to do that.
I'm also thinking we've had CSC present twice over the last 3 years, so maybe I'll reach out to that presenter and see if you wouldn't mind having a chat. Anonymous, if you want to let us know, you know, CSC or if there's other organizations that might be, you know, InfoSec or ITSec, or is it internal? I guess we couldn't really do that, but if we can reach out to CSC and other organizations to see if they have the same issues, we'll definitely do that over the next little while. As I mentioned, in May, we have DOJ presenting, May or June, and in May or June, we have Treasury Board GC Exchange presenting. So I'll ask that question of DOJ, see if they have any concerns about InfoSec and ITSec and whether they can present on that subject. Great question. Thank you so much. Again, if you're interested in presenting at any of the GoC M365 councils, we'll be kicking off. So we've got May, June covered. We'll take July, August off. We're kicking off again in September. And it's always great to hear from other organizations. We have some great updates from everybody. We believe we'll do the EDRMS and M365 in September, the IRB one. We might even ask Treasury Board to do an update on their EDRMS in M365 in October. I think that'd be worthwhile. Thanking everybody. I think that was our one and only question. Thanking everybody. Really appreciate it. I think we had some seminars in May that are coming. Sorry, we'll make sure everybody's invited. I think that might be a last slide, Sylvana, but we are looking at talking about some great subjects, and we'll keep everybody informed as we go along. But yeah, I don't know if you got that up, Sylvana, if you could do that for me quickly.
A second here.
Yeah, thank you. So yes, thanking everybody. If you can see, that's great. So we're definitely doing blockchain, seal, and SharePoint online. It'd be an interesting subject for anyone interested in that. With connecting software, it's May 18th. Make sure everybody's invited. Harmony, we're going to do a case study of ESDC's journey to M365 and using Harmony's 365 pivotal role in their journey to M365, particularly email management is what they're doing there. And we're doing one on June 1st on WalkMe, which is digital adoption, and quite a few people are using that for digital adoption in M365. We'll walk through all those. So thanking everybody for dialing in, and have yourself a believe we give everybody a good half hour back in their day. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.